Hello, I'm Jonathan Carr-West. I'm Chief Executive at LGIU and delighted to welcome you to our latest interview with leaders in local government. And today I'm joined by Helen Mitchell. Helen is Director of Local Government Reorganisation at Oxfordshire County Council. She's been in local government since about 2008. She's worked in district councils, in unitary councils, and she's also crucially spent a bit of time on the other side of the fence with roles at MHCLG and the Department for Business as Trade, and she spent some time at the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny. Through all this, she's been really focused on change management, on forward strategy, on governance improvement, all of which, I guess, come together in the knotty issue of LGR. So today, Helen's going to tell us a little bit about how Oxfordshire's LGR process is progressing, what comes next following the submission of proposals at the end of November, and maybe getting into a little bit, though this is complicated, the sort of interaction between LGR and the devolution process. So firstly, Helen, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jonathan. Lovely to be here.
Great. Now, before we get into all that fascinating stuff, maybe just a little bit about you. Could you tell us a bit about your background in local government and what sort of sparked your interest in the whole area of reorganisation and devolution?
Oh gosh, my background really, Jonathan, is and I have to give a shout out to my original profession here, because it would be completely remiss of me not to do so. But I started off in the world of democratic services back in 2008 at North East Derbyshire District Council, and that I think has really sort of shaped my career, my thinking over the last few years, shall we say. I think it's 16 or 17 years I've been in sort of public service now. Held a range of sort of democratic scrutiny, elections and policy type roles across all the different council types you've shared there, but also hopping into the NHS for a bit and into the civil service. I think for me, it's local government is a key institution that genuinely shapes the life chances of people in our country, and sort of certainly for me, being part of that bigger whole and also working in a democratic organisation, I've always felt very, very close to and wanting to contribute to would be, I suppose, a clear opportunity to want to lead a process like LGR. It is a huge responsibility, privilege, but also a fairly significant burden as well, to think about the weight of both expectation in which to, particularly from a county council perspective, being able to use the opportunity of moving into a new state and not necessarily having the challenges associated sometimes with disaggregation, but being able to use that experience and that position in which to positively disrupt the way in which we design and deliver services to the varying different populations of Oxfordshire. So for me, it's really getting into the benefits of how we can start to think about redesigning a place and places that fit, but also local government services can amplify and improve the life chances of across counties like Oxfordshire and many others across England.
Thank you. And that's really important. I'm going to come back to that point about outcomes, because I think one of the things that sometimes gets lost in this process is we're so kind of in it. We're so on doing the process that we need to keep an eye on why are we doing this? What's it for? How is the world going to be better when we're finished with all, or when we've got to the next stages of this? I'll come back to that. But before I do, obviously, we've got local government reorganisation going on. We've got devolution going on. They both come out of the white paper, but they're different processes with a complex set of interrelations and sort of time dependencies, and they're happening at different speeds. How are you managing the relationship and the sort of connection and separation of those two processes?
To manage it, I suppose, is not necessarily to lead it, Jonathan. This is a squiggly mess. Yeah. And that's fine. I hope this interview doesn't just sort of give me opportunities to sort of horrendously name drop lovely people who have given me their time over the last few months. We
like to appreciate lovely people.
Like horrendous name drops. The lovely Mark Rogers at the Leadership Centre said to me that all LGR is relational. That is the main outcome, and that is to improve relations. And I think that is really important, because being able to run, manage, lead a process like LGR at the same time as and in tandem with the creation of new institution with authorities that we might with some of them we might share a border with, but we may not really have embedded in successive years a level of joint working, particularly on economic matters, is a real challenge. I think one of the things that Oxfordshire has done, and both the county council and our district colleagues as well, is we've just embraced the Devo white paper with both hands. Some places have not done that in the same way that Oxfordshire has, and I think that's a testament to how Oxfordshire is. It wants to look outside and it wants to do things differently, and we should expect that. It is the cleverest county in the world, as I will always say. There's not lots of people here with PhDs, and I think that now's the time for us to break out and be able to be that force that we need to. But ultimately, in order for us to get the very best out of devolution, GR, we feel, particularly at the County Council, and I'm sure colleagues elsewhere do as well, feel that LGR's needed in which to really turbocharge how devolution can work to full effect. Having unitary or unitaries around the table with our colleagues in Berkshire at this stage is really all about making devolution work across these areas. And you will know, Jonathan, the southeast is a fair old desert. I don't think we've used the phrase devolution desert for quite some time.
No.
I'm going to bring it back into fashion.
Ministers were very keen on it for a while.
Yes, it's a very wet desert at this moment in time, particularly as I look out of my window here at County Hall over Oxford. But we are a bit of a desert in these parts, and we want to do something about it. And I think that's really, really important to do that, and having that additional democratic structure for residents and for businesses, for that matter, is very important to deliver for this place.
And how do you see? I mean, there's so much in that, and I think that point about, you're quoting Mark Rogers on it being sort of relational. I remember him also saying the relationships you get are the ones you aim for, and there's something about the intentionality of that as well, isn't there? Of like, this process is about making sure that relationships aren't just like, well, whatever it is. We're intentionally setting out to create the relationships we need to make this work. And on that basis, you talked a lot about councils, but how do you see that all working with the whole kind of other set of institutions that sort of work across the region, whether that's public sector bodies or sort of, foundational institutions like the university, or, how does this help us to kind of tie that whole piece together?
Share where we're at the minute in terms of my colleague Kim Sawyer is working really closely with the sort of landed institutions in this part of the world. As you said, our university base, of which we've obviously got University of Oxford, we've got Brookes, but we've also got University of Reading as well. Yeah. A whole sort of big family of fee structures as well across this place, and some very, very important national science, technology assets and businesses. Our leader, Councillor Liz Leffman, is always very clear about the relationships between the City of Oxford, its institutions, and the whole network and the knowledge spine that we have across Oxfordshire, which takes in Harwell in the south, right through Culham, and also into the north, where we have some incredible science parks up at Bedbrook as well. So we've got a huge amount of support for devolution. And businesses are seeing it as a positive way in which to amplify the voice of the Thames Valley. So I suppose it's around how we bring all of that together in order to push government to accept the expression of interest as well, Jonathan.
Absolutely. And I know this sort of varies, and this has changed over time, but currently how, because we talked about making those institutions work together, there's also the convening, the soft power, how do we see mayors fitting into this eventually?
Eventually, yes. And that's a good word to use. I think that's always been the power of the mayoral model. Is that ability to convene, and you'll have seen, Jonathan, over many years, English politics becoming ever more presidential. I think it was under the first set of leaders' debates in a for general elections started under Gordon Brown, and they've not gone away. We've seemed to start taking a level of delight in having one person to do something for a place or a set of places. And I think mayors, importantly, have been able to carry on in that vein following the first set of combined authorities that we had back in 2017. I think that the soft power of the mayoral model is incredibly important. The convening power and that ability to just sort of use the office of the mayor and the visibility that they have in which to bring people together. We'll have seen throughout COVID what Andy Burnham did during COVID in sticking up for Greater Manchester. That is a fairly essential part of being mayoral and being able to stand up for a place when things get very, very difficult, but also step into spaces where traditionally mayors maybe don't have that express power within. Homelessness again has been a key area of Greater Manchester's mayoral model and priorities for some time, and I think that should absolutely continue. I think particularly given where the UK economy is at the moment, UK PLC has an inordinate amount of soft power for our cultural institutions, and none more so than there are in Oxford here with our incredible museums and the way in which the city projects itself and projects a positive image of Britain today. I think that the soft power elements across culture, across sport as well, and our sporting heritage will be incredibly important going forward as part of international investment in UK PLC. We're already seeing delegations. I'm trying to think. I think Andy Burnham and Steve Rotherham possibly did a delegation over to Pennsylvania not that long ago. I think we're going to see a lot more of this. Mayors as front doors, clear front doors for international investment, particularly in the Thames Valley. That's right. Really important for us.
And it provides that figurehead, that doorway, that something that works across the region and kind of
absolutely
ties up with it. Yeah. All right. So with this devolution, let's get back to LGR, which is what you're spending most of your time doing. And I know there are many people in local government who feel that's a whole sort of job that's landed. Got a full-time job doing LGR and a full-time job running the council. Just give people, for those who haven't been following this as closely, many of our audience would have been following this incredibly closely. For those who haven't, just remind people what the kind of current state of play is in Oxfordshire. You have different proposals went in on the 28th of November. You have different proposals covering the Oxfordshire region. How many have you got?
So we've got a total of 3 that have been submitted. We've got the County Council has submitted a proposal for a single unitary authority across the whole of Oxfordshire. We've got a second proposal which creates a northern and a southern unitary. So the northern unitary is made up of the city of Oxford, Cherwell District and West Oxfordshire. And the southern unitary is South Oxfordshire, Vale of Whitehorse District, but also it is the unitary authority of West Berkshire. And then the third option is Greater Oxford, so it's the city of Oxford on expanded boundaries and with a northern unitary to the north, coincidentally, and the southern unitary to the south, also including West Berkshire as well. A fairly full array of options.
And for viewers who haven't been from overseas or haven't been engaged with it, if you think that's complicated, you haven't seen anything yet. I mean, that there are far more complex.
Yes, there are
areas than that, but it does create a degree of uncertainty. So you have 3 proposals effectively on the Secretary of State's desk, waiting for a decision expected sort of late summer next year.
Well, we're expecting the statutory consultation to take place in the new year. So we are busy preparing for that, but a decision or minded to in the summer of next year, just before recess.
Yes, I mean, sorry, that's my reflexive. I try and stop at a reflexive sort of cynical look whenever any government timetable is mentioned. But so what happens now? While you're waiting, you're doing the consultation, you're waiting for the minded to decision from government. What are you doing now? What are you getting on with in that? It feels like it's a slightly, in some ways, you'd be forgiven for seeing it as a bit of a sort of limbo. But obviously, you're not treating it like that. What are you getting on with?
No, I wish I had the energy to limbo, Jonathan. If I'm absolutely honest with you, but no, what we are doing at the moment is we're working up plans in which to do some discovery works or pre-transition work, which is, a good bit of housekeeping. So getting ready for LGR, looking at the data that we hold. Can we improve it? Does it need a good tidy up? What are our risks? What are our opportunities? And really just starting to think about how, certainly from our perspective, how we can start really to conceptualise what a single unitary authority for the whole of Oxfordshire could do quite differently. At the same time, we're having some really good conversations with colleagues across our districts, but also colleagues in West Berkshire, about how we can work as a system to do this work in tandem with each other from a sharing of resources perspective, but just from a common sense perspective. It makes a huge amount of sense that we work together to gain that momentum going into the minded to decision. So whichever decision is arrived at, and we hope we do get a decision for Oxfordshire, we've got a lot of support, and actually colleagues across Berkshire have written to government asking for a quick decision. And some of our business community as well have been really clear that they're looking for a quick decision from government, particularly given that we've just recently had the publication of the Oxford Growth Commission's report, Neil Coleman's report, and also the huge opportunities associated with the Oxford to Cambridge corridor. So we need some clarity in this part of the world, Jonathan, in order to move forward. We're doing some of the base work in which to understand where we are and also where we're going, at the same time as well as working out what kind of staffing requirement we need, because this is not going to be something that we can do on a shoestring.
No.
And that is a challenge in itself with the current financial climate that we have across England. But we are having to search down the back of the sofa very, very heavily at this moment in time, because the process of LGR is not cheap, and it does require a lot of investment and commitment from senior leaders as well.
That's right. And for any viewers who want to sort of dig into this, just a brief plug of the LGIU's analysis of the LGR proposals, where you can see all the estimated transition costs for Oxfordshire and every other region across all of the proposals, and the projected savings and the payback times, all of that set out. And what you see is there's a very wide range of all of those things across the country. So, Helen, I'm interested in two things. You made the point about sort of also working as a system and coming back together. And one of the things we're seeing across the country is a, how do I put this? A variety, that is more or less difficult in different places, depending on how the process has gone over the course of 2025. What are you finding are the sort of the keys or the sort of key things to sort of having that constructive conversation across county, district, partners, where people have been putting forward competing proposals? How are you sort of bringing people back together again?
I think it's important to sort of give a bit of context around the sort of bringing back together. I think what we have done really, really well in Oxfordshire is share information really, really easily, and there has been really good lines of communication across the family, and that includes colleagues in West Berkshire as well. This sort of notion of sort of coming back together, I don't necessarily think that we've been apart. We just may not necessarily have been as close as other councils have progressed. I mean, if I think about how proposals just to our northerly neighbours in Gloucestershire, there's been very, very, very close working in Gloucestershire across the 1 and the 2 proposal in particular. We've not done that in Oxfordshire, and that's absolutely fine. So I think what the distance to get back together is incredibly short. And it's up to us as public servants to make that as short as possible and continue to be as short as possible, because we're not here for us, we're here for residents.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that has to be the focus to answer your question, Jonathan. It has to be residents that are in the forefront of our mind all the time. And some of those residents are incredibly vulnerable, and we need to make sure that we have their best interests at heart. So that's certainly how I will be defining my practice over the next few years, and has thus far, really.
So keeping that as the sort of North Star to sort of go, is like, actually, it's not about institutions, it's not about us, it's about residents. As we look at that roadmap, get the minded two decision, you move towards a shadow authority, you move towards vesting day. How do you think, and at what stage do you start really trying to figure out the sort of core principles that should guide the design of a sort of new, because effectively we are creating, if there is a single unitary, it is not a county council, it's not the district council. And if there is three or whatever, those are not district. Whatever happens, whatever decision we get, we are creating entirely new organizations that will be doing a different range of things to that which is done by any of the existing organizations, with the exception of some of the unitaries. But so how do we start building in sort of thinking about those design principles for those new organizations, and when is it appropriate to do that?
So I would definitely say that is in our mind now. And if you care to read the One Oxfordshire proposal, Jonathan, you will see that we have a sort of operating framework in there in which we want to major very heavily on prevention, on place, but also on operational efficiency. One of the key areas that as a county council has been a huge priority of the administration is around health and well-being.
Yeah.
And a fairer, healthier and greener Oxfordshire. We are a Marmot place, and we're very lucky to have had the support from Sir Michael Marmot over, I think, for a little while now in defining what that looks like across Oxfordshire. So prevention is going to be one of our key areas that we want to embed in any future authority. But to be honest, that is a key element as well of other proposals across Oxfordshire for 2 unitaries and for 3 unitaries as well. So it's around how the flavour of prevention moves into what it does look like for a 1, a 2 and a 3. So again, this is why it's so important to work as a system, because ultimately...
Do that foundational work.
Exactly. Yeah. What does it look like? So for me, prevention is really key. I think the other thing as well, which again comes back to probably my first love around democratic services is just around making sure that democracy works. And I think it's a fairly reasonable critique that some of the proposals for larger authorities, and they're not necessarily single unitary authorities, it's been fairly clear throughout the whole year that the concept of a local authority of 500,000 is seen as too big in some quarters. We've got proposals coming forward. My own county of Derbyshire, I think, is the lead in terms of the largest single authority that's coming through, a single Derbyshire, which would just be over 1 million residents and would include the city of Derby, the existing unitary. We have to get democracy right for people. We're seeing sort of election turnouts not as strong as they used to be. We've got
great to start with.
No, and I think that the public seem to be weary of elections in some parts of the country in particular. But there also has to be, and again, I think looking at some of the other proposals that have come forward, if you look at the three Essex model, there is a really clear ambition in there that these councils need to invoke a real spirit of localism and of delivery on the ground, and through a new generation of area committees to show the public that when they do democracy, when they engage with democracy, then it will deliver for them. I think the age of delivery has been lost a little, and I think that there is an opportunity in which to bring that back closer to communities as part of LGR and devolution as well.
I think that's right, 100%. And we need to think about that because, and again, those who are interested can look at LGIU's LGR analysis. You can set out the whole range of different sizes being proposed, what impact that has on number of councillors, what people are thinking about in terms of area committees. But the reality is that whatever options are chosen, even the options with more councils, those are still bigger council units than currently exist. And so that necessity to think about how do you kind of do local work within a bigger institution, that's going to have to happen, whatever the Secretary of State decides, because everything is going to be bigger than what we have now.
Yes.
Even if we don't go to the full Derbyshire or one of the Kent proposals, it's the whole of Kent and Medway, 1.2 million people. Wherever we end up, it's bigger than we have now, and we need to think about how we maintain localized delivery and democratic engagement within that.
Absolutely so. And I think that the proxy of area committees being a signal to doing democracy locally well is but a proxy. think that, if I think to the sort of days gone by around local area boards, local area forums, they are meetings that there is a huge amount of input into.
Yes.
And the phrase "the same old people turn up" is something that I've heard quite a lot throughout the course of the year. And I think that there has to be a range of different ways in which new authorities engage and involve the public and businesses and other stakeholders, for that matter, in the business of councils is really important. That's not to say area committees can't work or won't work, but we do have to think about them with a more modern lens and about how they engage all elements of the community, and not just those that are available at 6:30 at the Terry Wright Centre at the top of Newfield Green in Sheffield at 6:30 in the evening. I think that is right for some parts of the community, but it's not right for them all. And equally, for those that simply don't want to engage, that's fine and as well, because that's also democratic.
Absolutely right. I mean, it reminds me of many years ago, a councillor saying to me, well, we did have some new people once, but by the time we got to agenda item 32, F.7, half of them had left. Well, yeah. Just don't call it a committee. Someone said to me in one of the DPP areas, don't call it a committee. How are you managing? So obviously one of the impacts on this is, we do see a degree of uncertainty for colleagues working within councils. People are understandably anxious about where this is going, what it means for their role, for their jobs. How are you working to sort of reassure colleagues during this period and to sort of bring people with you and make sure that people do see this as, or to try and help people see this as an opportunity rather than a sort of a thing that's being done to them?
Yeah. Well, I think that this is where we need the support of all of our organisations in terms of our internal communications and employee engagement colleagues working together with sort of programme leadership to make sure that we can reach all parts of our staff. I think it's certainly from a senior leadership perspective, it is very, very difficult time. It's been a difficult year for everybody in local government. From an Oxfordshire perspective, it's been quite a heavy year. We've had, as you probably know, Jonathan, we've had inspections across adults and children's services. We had the awful Bicester fire at the start of the year, in which we lost two of our colleagues and a member of the public. And even more recently now, we've been on the television in recent weeks with the dump that's been left for us by organised criminals in Kidlington.
Yeah.
So it's been a year that has tugged on many parts of our senior leaders. I think it's about the human touch and being present, supporting and giving colleagues the visibility over what's going on to help them understand, and also how they can support with the LGR process, and being a really visible leader to their teams as well. I think one of the things that we've been quick to establish, and one of the areas of development for next year, is bringing together sort of LGR and devolution ambassadors across the organisation. So we've currently got around 20 across the county council, and I'd like to think that we can expand that out. So having staff across the length and breadth of the county council who get LGR and get devolution sounds really easy, but it's not. Even our colleagues at the BBC struggle to understand the differences between the two. And I think having staff that are equipped and confident around what LGR is, what devolution is, but also being there to support us with this pre-transition work that I shared earlier, to be able to think about how we could look to serving our populations best going forward, and starting to get those ideas together to create a single authority for Oxfordshire, or indeed a 2-unitary or a 3-unitary Oxfordshire, where we can do the absolute best for our residents, those that are here now and are yet to be born. Senior managers don't have a monopoly on good ideas, and I think it's important to harness the thoughts of our staff and our leaders, but also of our big stakeholders and our littler stakeholders as well. We said in our proposal that we'd create an Oxfordshire Advisory Board made up of colleagues from the VCS, our education institutions and businesses, to maintain that corporate knowledge and that corporate memory, but also be able to ensure that when we get into a position where we are designing that future authority, that we're being as positively disruptive as we possibly can.
And right, and of course, many of those colleagues in both within the council and other organisations are also residents, are also citizens. But that brings us to the future, and I guess where I wanted to finish was thinking about, look, as you know, at LGIU we're really focused on trying to understand the future role of local government, trying to shape that, trying to make sure that that's fit for purpose. When you think out across a 5-year, a 10-year horizon, what do you want this all to deliver? How do you see the role of local government working with strategic authorities, delivering for residents? What's the opportunity here? What should we be trying to grasp?
For me, I think the beauty, and this is probably, people may take a sharp intake of breath and think that's a very weird thing for Helen to say at this moment. But I think local government is a place of quiet brilliance, Jonathan. And I think that's where we need to think about being quietly brilliant. I have a horrendous name drop, but I have a very long-standing colleague of mine who's the assistant chief exec at Sandwell, is a chap called James McLaughlin, who on his Twitter profile used to call himself a humble functionary of local government. And I think it's about being humble. I think what we need to do is we need to recognise that we don't work we are not an island. It's not just about how social care runs. It's about how our populations live and work and interact, and how some of the poorest places in our society might be poor but based on indices, but these are rich and vibrant communities that all of our places can learn from. I would really like to see more deeper involvement and a complete lack of barriers between the NHS and local government from a cultural perspective, and I can almost safely say this as somebody that's worked in the NHS previously. That will require a sea change approach, but there are the seeds of that here in Oxfordshire. We have one of the largest, I think it is the largest, pooled budget outside a combined authority. So it's £500 million of pooled budget that we have in Oxfordshire with our ICB, and that could be leveraged for great benefit. Seamless services that people can access as close as possible to the main towns, cities, and I think, again, thinking about how the first tier works around parish and town councils. There are parishes and towns out there that want to do more. And I think that enabling those institutions, those first institutions of the state, to do more where it's right to do so is really important. So I'm not going to share any spectacular ideas with you, Jonathan, because I think we've been doing this stuff for quite some time. Where I feel that it needs to go further is that we need to be able to get out there and use organisations like yourselves to share great practice, not just best practice, great practice, using our institutions, our education institutions, in which to drive research and practice that research, sort of knowledge-based and evidence-based policy making. All of these ingredients are here across England. I don't think necessarily that there are consistent approaches in which to bring it together, in which to create that package of support for local authorities. So quiet brilliance is important, Jonathan. And there's no rock and roll. We don't need to be rock and roll in local government. I think we have to harness the quiet brilliance of things and all the ingredients that we have already across our systems into something that's coherent and works together, and that there are no barriers, or as few barriers as possible, between our big institutions like the NHS, local government, and ultimately, in time, mayoral strategic authorities.
Yeah, I think that's really inspiring. Thank you. But that really fits with our view at LGIU, right? That's partly how we said the seeds. I mean, this is going to be a terrible note, but the seeds are out there, and we need to nurture them and grow them, but then connect them and show them to each other, and sort of create the garden out of. And I'm going to sort of take that sort of gardening metaphor to death, but so much is happening out in local government. But too often it just kind of sits by itself, and no one celebrates it, connects it, shares it. And that's the sort of nurturing and connective role that we need to play. That's brilliant. Look, Helen, that's amazing. It's all we've got time for today, but thank you so much for those insights. Because I think also that's about LGR, but it's about more than LGR. It's about thinking about what we are in public service to do and what local government is for, And I think that's so important because, look, there is always a risk that we kind of get buried in the process and buried in the sort of like, oh gosh, we've got this deadline and that deadline. And what's the government going to do? And what are they going to do? And so that focus on actually, how does this create better outcomes for residents? Your point about residents as the North Star that we keep, how does this help our residents? How does it take us forward? What do we create? That's so, so important. And I know that will be really interesting both to other people going through this journey, but also to people who are not doing LGR or in different places, because those challenges, joining up, connecting best practice, great practice, as you said, nurturing what's good, communicating, keeping residents, those are true for all local democratic institutions everywhere. So it's incredibly useful. Helen, thank you. Thank you to everyone for listening, for watching, reading. We will be back soon with more interviews, but in the meantime, you can find us at lgiu.org, where you will find lots of resources, both about local government reorganisation, but also about all of the other issues that Helen touched on today. So thank you for joining us. And Helen, once again, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.